When is the last time you went outside at night to gaze at the stars? How much do you really know about the moon, our solar system, and Milky Way galaxy? While we can all easily find beautiful images of the celestial bodies online, learning how to use a telescope to view the night sky firsthand can be an incredible source of wonder and awe. That's all up next on Still Time for Joy, where we share practical advice for weathering life's storms and inspiring stories of resilience. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy. My guest today is Jim Webster, president of the Astronomical Society of the Toms River area, located at the New Jersey shore. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Hi, Sandy. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. So, ASTRA, what is the mission of your group?
The mission of ASTRA is to share the wonders of the night sky through a telescope. And for us to do that, we'll host star parties to give the public a first-hand view through them to see what's out there.
So, why do you think it's important for people to actually go outside, learn how to use a telescope, and experience the night sky firsthand?
To go outside, to see things that are out there, not using a computer, using a traditional telescope where your eye is out up to the telescope to see what's out there, whether it's a star or a planet. Even the moon, which is one of our first things that we actually look at. And it brings to mind all the things that you can do, searching out in the sky.
It's just a different experience to just be out in nature, get away from the technology, get away from the computer, and take a look through a telescope. It must be very exciting for people who either have never done it or haven't done it in a long time. So these star parties, who typically comes, how many people come, and how exactly do they work?
With the star parties, we can get typically anywhere from 20 to 80 people, and we'll have as many as 10 telescopes from our members that'll share their telescopes with the public on the objects that they're actually viewing at the time. And that could be anywhere from children to senior citizens. There's something there for everybody.
So members, when they're training their telescopes on different objects in the night sky, what are some of the stars or planets that somebody might see?
Well, we can be looking at Jupiter and Saturn, which are two favorite planets that people like to look at. The moon is a good object to look at because it's usually the first thing people learn about in the night sky. And for viewing the moon, you really want to look at the craters and the valleys when it's not a full moon because you have a lot of shadowing, which is the most impressive for the moon. For stars, you could be looking at a double star. In the middle of the Big Dipper is a double star with the Mizar. Mizar is a pair of stars that are very close to each other. So that'd be like a double star.
I remember growing up, we used to look up in the night sky and find the Little Dipper and find the Big Dipper. And it took a little time before you could find it, but eventually you did. And that was kind of a source of pride when you could look up at the sky and identify the Little Dipper or the Big Dipper. Do you find today children are not learning about that in school or from their families, and they're not being exposed to trying to find those with the naked eye?
Yes, in a large part, we're seeing that astronomy has actually been taken out in the lower grades, and they're losing a lot. When I went to school, that was one of the first things we learned. Doing the Saturn missions, I had to make my daily workbook for when they were going to the moon. You don't really see that anymore. The only time I've noticed that people really get involved in astronomy is if they're actually in college at the time, which is something I never went through because I'm just a pure amateur. I do this for the fun of it because I like doing it.
And I read somewhere that you got started as a child. You were actually living in Brooklyn using a telescope to try to look at the moon out the window. Talk to me about how you first became interested in astronomy.
Well, I always was because with our school, astronomy was important, part of our science curriculum at Immaculate Heart. And that was right around the time when the astronauts were going to the moon, the Apollo 11 missions. And that's when I had gotten the telescope to work on like scout badges. So our second floor apartment, I always kept sticking my telescope out the window whenever the moon was around.
And could you see it?
Oh yeah, it was a great view, looking at the craters and the valleys with the shadowing going around. You know, was really impressive to look at. You don't really want to look at the moon when it's full because it's straight on, so all that kind of like disappears. But when you're going through the phasing of the moon, that's when you want to look.
So, as a child, when you looked at the moon and you saw the craters, what was your feeling inside? What did you think about being able to see the moon with a telescope or without? What was fascinating about it to you?
Well, when I was a kid looking through the telescope, I always wanted to see if I could see the astronauts on the moon, but you couldn't see it. But it always gave me those dreams of wanting to go there myself.
So, when children and adults come to these star parties and they're looking through a telescope, perhaps for the first time or for the first time in a long time, what kind of reactions do you see and hear?
The reactions that we've seen were a lot of amazement, kids getting excited, for what they're seeing and they want to see more. Other ones, want to get their own telescopes at that point. And we'll talk to the parents about, what are the better telescopes for a child to get, to go with the simple basic telescopes, not to go with the big electronic ones. Because it's always better to learn the sky, through a simpler device as opposed to like a lot of electronics.
And as people begin studying astronomy, sometimes they become what's called citizen scientists. What do citizen scientists typically do? And as far as astronomy goes, how do they add to the knowledge base about the universe?
Through citizen science, anybody can actually get involved with the project with a group like SciStarter. And there are projects for looking at the moon, seeing if there's differences on the moon from what was already recorded. So it could be like a new crater, that needs to be recorded and discovered. There is sonification, which means you're doing audio, listening to what's going on with the universe. Each planet within our solar system has a different sound. Other citizen science through your telescope could be looking for new asteroids, which is part of planetary defense. So we want to keep an eye on that, and citizen scientists are now making big contributions into that endeavor. And that's just a few items. There's a lot more out there.
And so SciStarter is SCI Starter. And if people
.org.
go to that website, they can learn more about how to get involved.
Yes.
When you want to go look at the night sky, it's very important that it's not cloudy and also that it's very dark. And I
Yes.
know you're very involved with an organization called the International Dark Sky Association. What is that about?
International Dark Sky Association, which just rebranded to Dark Sky International, is for the protection of the night sky from light pollution. Light pollution is a big issue for astronomers, but more importantly, it has a bigger impact on our environment as well as our own health.
Talk to me about what that impact is. It can have an impact both on people and on animals. What are some of the impacts of excessive light pollution?
An example for like plants, trees will bud early and drop their leaves later, which shortens their lifespans. Sea turtles, when they hatch, they'll go inland instead of going out to the ocean because they're attracted to the lights. A big problems with our bird population. The vast majority of our birds here in North America are nighttime migrators. So they'll crash into buildings. An example would be the World Trade Center, where it used to be. The Audubon Society will watch how many birds will get trapped in those lights, and they'll turn the lights off several times at night just to let the birds fly on to where they really should be going.
It also can impact people. It can be disruptive to your sleep. What other impacts can it have on people? Too much light at night.
Yeah, impact to your sleep, the proper distribution of your melatonin in your system, and it can contribute to several different forms of cancer.
So, how would you define light pollution as an astronomer when you're trying to go out and look at the night sky? I mean, we live in the most densely populated state in the nation, New Jersey. You have to go to some trouble to find good dark night sky here in New Jersey. What happens when you don't have the proper darkness and you're trying to see the stars?
If you don't have the proper darkness, without making enhancements to your telescopes, you would have to probably travel great distances to get to the proper dark skies. Fortunately for ASTRA, we do have a park called Jake's Branch, which has a okay sky that works with our telescopes. We also have through a permit to go to Island Beach State Park for the ASTRA group, and we'll work with the park people to hold star parties there. And fortunately, we can still make out the Milky Way at Island Beach State Park on a good night.
For people who aren't familiar with Island Beach State Park, it is a beautiful stretch of natural habitat in New Jersey. It's just about 10 miles long with very, very, very few buildings on it and not a lot of light. How can you describe what it's like to be out on the beach and being able to see the Milky Way?
It's wonderful. I'll go there even without a telescope, just to sit there with my DSLR camera taking photos of the Milky Way. And I'll take hundreds of photos at night just so I can create what's called a time-lapse video. And I have a joy of just capturing those moments of picking up on the Milky Way. The Milky Way in itself is my favorite thing of everything.
Of course, it's incredible to take pictures of and look at the Milky Way. So, are there any big celestial events coming up that we should know about?
Well, there's been an ongoing alignment of the planets. Jupiter and Saturn are out there, the two favorites for everybody to take a look at. What we also have going is that the Orion Nebula is out there in the constellation of Orion, which would be just below the belt of Orion, what we would call the Sword. And in that region, there are several nebulae, but Orion is everybody's favorite for observing as well as taking photos.
Explain what a nebula is, please.
A nebula is a hot pocket of gas. It could be in relation to a death of a star or the birth of stars. There's several different versions of nebulae.
So, how do you feel when you show somebody the planets through a telescope for the first time, whether a child or an adult, and they really catch the bug? They really love it. What does that mean to you?
It's a great feeling. I love sharing to everybody everything about astronomy. I'll let them ask questions and I'll answer them to, the best of my ability. And all our members in ASTRA are pretty much the same way. We have one person who we call the Star Party Queen, and she knows everything about the night sky, and she knows things even the experts don't know about. We have another member that is a full-on expert on the moon. He knows every single aspect about it, and he doesn't need to look it up in a book to tell people. And then we have another member who is a great telescope person and can tell everybody every nut and bolt that's associated with a telescope. So we like to just talk astronomy to everybody.
And you have a program through which people can actually borrow a telescope from you, right? People who don't have one can borrow one?
Yes, ASTRA has a telescope loaner program. That would be for people who will join, and after they learn about telescopes, then we'll let them, borrow the what's called a Dobsonian telescope, which is an open tube to a mirror, to another mirror to your lens. And when they're there a little bit longer, then we'll let them borrow a small electronic telescope. But more importantly, we want those new members or people interested to spend time with each of our members that will have different telescopes, to learn about them that way. Firsthand, working with a person side by side, almost like a mentor.
I know you also are very much into photography. What are some of the most amazing images that you've been able to capture?
I do a lot of DSLR camera photos, and my primary interest is doing time lapse with the Milky Way. But I've done some deep sky imaging of the Orion Nebula region. So it would be going from Orion Nebula out to what's called the Flame Nebula. So that's a big, area of skies. We have more experienced astronomers in our group that are taking deep sky images through specialized electronic cameras built for the telescopes. We won't really have that out for star parties because the main focus would be for people viewing it through the telescope lens, unless it's like a smart telescope that I use. And the benefit of a smart telescope is for people with visual and physical deficiencies, so they can actually experience the night skies as well.
And a smart telescope will put the image onto like an iPad so you can still see it, right?
Yes, a cell phone and an iPad.
I want to get back just for a second to the dark sky question and the light pollution. Is there anything we can do about it? What do you recommend the average citizen can do? And I understand you also consult with organizations about how they can reduce light pollution.
Yes, we'll work with environmental groups throughout New Jersey to educate people about the night sky and how to protect it. We go by the 5 principles of having the lights fully shielded and on a timer, a low luminous or Kelvin light bulb, because we want to go into the amber range. And if people are really interested in learning more, they can go to darksky.org and see all that information on how to protect the night sky.
And finally, Jim, just describe to me once more how you feel about looking at the stars and the planets and the Milky Way. What kind of feeling does it give you to be out there and seeing these things through your telescope and through your naked eye?
Oh, it's great. I enjoy every aspect of dealing with the night sky. I like being out there with my fellow astronomers from ASTRA. We all have the same interest, and we can be out there for hours because there's always something out there to see. And we've been out in some scenarios like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning of observing. It's just that great out there.
What's the coolest thing you've ever seen?
The coolest thing I've seen is the fireballs for meteor streaks going by, because you will see those as well because you're looking up all the time.
And you mentioned earlier that as a child you wanted to go into space. Do you still want to go into space? Because there are opportunities to do that now.
Yes, I would love to do that. Unfortunately, for some physical issues, I can't. But I could still always dream about it. And my career goal would have been, in modern terms, called astrometrics. But I can't be on the Starship Enterprise.
Well, looking through the telescope, I guess, is the next best thing.
Yes, it
Jim
is.
Webster, president of the Astronomical Society of the Toms River area, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about astronomy and telescope and the planets and the stars with so many people. And thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you. It was great being here.
If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it. And follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms, as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.